That's right, it's time for the Terry Sullivan Show. Today's guest, Dr. Helen Sullivan. And now, here he is once again. It's Terry Sullivan.
Thank you, T.
How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm happy about this episode.
Yeah, you are?
I am.
You know, we did one with a mom, and it went by like that.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I was just so glad she didn't say anything bad about me.
That's this episode. This is the dirt. The dirt episode.
No. She already said I was a good kid. Much better than my sister. I think that's what I heard.
You know, I've heard reporting on the news. It's never accurate, so.
Yeah. Mom, it's good to have you on show number 2.
Thank you.
We didn't get into a lot of stuff on the last one, so I decided, you know what, we're just going to have another one.
Okay.
So I'm still going to talk about growing up a little bit, because we're talking about, you know, people today, especially kids, have no idea how hard it was back in the, well, way back, but in your day, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and all of that. But there were a lot of new things that came about that you got to experience in your lifetime. Automobiles, television, you know
Computers.
Computers. Yeah, you know, it's funny that kids these days have no idea what it was like, but not having email, a phone that you carry with you. Because back then, when you were growing up back in East Texas, y'all had a landline, but it was a party line.
Well, we didn't. We never, at my house, my dad's house, we never had a phone. My grandparents had one that hung on the wall as a party line. And
now explain what that party line means.
well, that just meant that probably 4 or 5 different families was on the same line. I don't know if that's the way to.
So if you picked up the phone, you could hear a conversation going on.
Oh yes, and we did that frequently. That's the way we kept up with all the gossip in the community, you know. And the same when we would make a call, we could hear somebody pick up, and we knew somebody was listening.
Well, what would you do? Would you say, "Hey, we're on the phone"?
That's exactly what we did. We'd say, "Would you please get off the phone so we can talk?" But that was a party line. So.
Yeah, but kids these days, they don't. I mean, life is so convenient today that it's difficult for them to fathom not having the conveniences that make their lives so easy. Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
So you graduated from high school. Then what happened?
I was 16 when I graduated from high school. I had been double promoted 2 different times in my elementary years, and so graduated at the age of 16. And all of my life, my parents were saving money for me to go to college. Education was a very important thing in our family and in my grandfather's family. They raised 8 children, and 2 of my aunts went to college, made teachers. I mean, this is back when people were poor, and you know, I mean, I look back and I think about how poor we were, but everybody was poor, so it didn't matter. We were all, you know, it didn't matter. We had plenty to eat, we had clothes, you know, and all that. So anyway, I graduated.
Were you raised in church?
Oh yes. Yeah. Church was a priority in our life. Yes, it was. My mother was a singer and a piano player. Music was very important, so we all took piano lessons and learned to play the piano.
Yeah.
And yes, church was very important. It was, I mean, there never was a question about going to church. When we got up
Yeah.
on Sunday morning, we were going to church.
Mm-hmm.
The same Sunday night, we went back to church.
And back in those days, before you got an automobile, you had to pile up in the wagon, I guess.
The pickup.
Before that, though.
Well, yeah, I guess we did. I don't even remember,
Yeah.
but I'm sure. Or either walk. It wasn't too far from our house to the church. It's
Yeah.
still where it is as you know it right now. You know?
Yeah,
So,
but you couldn't just jump in the car and go down the road.
no,
Yeah.
no. But, yeah, all of my life. And when, we'll probably talk about this later, but when my late husband and I married in 1953, actually, all of our dating and everything had been centered around the church, and so that was a priority for us.
Yeah.
From
Well,
our-
now,
our-
where did you meet Dad at?
It's a little bit of a long story, but his dad was a minister in Fort Worth, and he was good friends to the minister at my church in East Texas, because that minister in East Texas actually lived in Fort Worth as well. So my husband's dad was invited to be a speaker for an Easter service down in East Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So he and his wife and your dad, who was a teenager at that time, about 17, I guess, something like that, 16, 17. But they all came down for Easter, and that's when I met him. And then when I graduated from high school, our pastor and wife, who lived in Fort Worth, invited me to come to Fort Worth and live with them and get a job. That was always a priority. When you get out of high school, you get a job. You know, even though you're going to college, you get a job.
Yeah.
So
But you had never been off the farm. I mean, it had to be scary moving to a big city.
Yeah, it was. I had been to Dallas a few times because we had relatives, and we'd come over to Dallas a few times, but it was very scary because I never had been anywhere really.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't even remember the experiences.
But you met Dad through that relationship.
Right, and started, when I got to Fort Worth, then I started going to the church that his dad was pastoring.
Yeah.
And so it was just a natural thing. It seemed like we ought to start dating.
Yeah.
So we did very soon, and that was in 1952. And so we did not marry until December of 1953. So we dated 18 months, something like that.
Yeah. And you and Dad were married for
61 years.
61 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, I've said it before, I've said it many times, we had such a great, I had such a great childhood, and Dad, the greatest man I've ever known, and great dad, great father, great husband, solid, you know. So it was great. So you started working, you and Dad got married.
Well, let's back up. After I got to Fort Worth, probably got there on Sunday night after church in East Texas, and the first thing I did, which I had never caught a city bus in my life, but there was a bus stop right there by where we lived, so I caught a bus and went downtown Fort Worth to the Texas Employment Agency to get a job. Now, I mean, here I am, 16 years old, you know, but I did that. I caught that bus, and I was never afraid to ask questions. I did learn that.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, but this is really funny.
But you were by yourself.
I was by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and downtown Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Big old city like that, by myself.
Yeah.
And then Mama had always taught us kids that, you know, you dress up, you look nice, and
Like I do.
Yeah, right. But
I saw that.
but when I went downtown, I wore a really fancy dress. I mean, it was like more like a party dress, you know. Yeah. But it was the best thing I had, and so I knew Mama would want me to wear that to interview for a job. But I got down there and, you know, went through the process, and they called me up, and this lady to interview me, and we talked about what I was interested in, and I think I took a typing test and all those things, but during the interview, she said, "Helen, you look beautiful. You look very, very pretty. But you need to go home and change in some different clothes, because if you walk in for an interview at a business place, you're not going to look like a working person. They want somebody that looks like they're ready to go to work. In other words, they didn't want me to look like I was going to a party.
Yeah, yeah.
I caught the bus. Well, she gave me my assignment of where I was going for a job interview, which was Houston Fire and Casualty Insurance Company in Fort Worth. And so I went back to the house on the bus, changed clothes, and then caught a bus in a different direction to go for my interview. And I got the job.
Yeah.
And
Now, how long, so you and Dad got married. How long before did you start going back to college?
oh, I did not start college until I was 29 years old.
So you stayed
Excuse
at
me.
home. You need a drink of water, Mama?
Maybe.
So you stayed at home while Debbie and I were going to school, or you stayed at home until Debbie and I got in school.
Right.
And
Right.
Then you went to college and you went to UNT.
Well, I started at University of Texas in Arlington.
Okay.
You know, living in Fort Worth, and I went 1 year there, and then during that time, though, your dad went to work at Texas Instruments in Dallas, and so we moved to Farmers Branch, and when we moved to Farmers Branch, then I started to UNT.
Yeah. This is what a lot of people don't know about you, especially in our business and the barbecue business, because in our business you're the pie lady, you're the pecan pie lady.
Yeah.
And you make, at 88 years old, almost 88 years old, you make all of our pecan pies, and people just love them. But you're very educated, went to UNT and...
Well, that was for my undergrad work, and then when I finished that, I got a job teaching in the Carrollton Farmers Branch School District. And I realized, it was like everything else, I realized that there was more to teaching than the skills I had. I needed to know more. You know, I just felt like I wasn't as good as I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So then I started on my master's degree. You know, I had to take a year out of that when we moved to Germany and lived in Germany.
Yeah.
Came back and finished up my master's degree, though.
Now, where'd you, was that at UNT?
No, I did that at Texas Woman's University,
Okay.
which was still in Denton, but
Yeah.
it was Texas Woman's University. And so I finished that in 1969. And there was a staff member on our church in Carrollton that worked at Arlington Baptist College, and he knew, and he went there as a student too. He worked at our church, but he went to Arlington as a student. And so he knew they were going to be hiring an English teacher, and that's what one of my minors was in. And so he told somebody about it, and they called me, and we were on vacation with your grandma and grandpa. And I got a call from Arlington Baptist College. I didn't, other than that guy from our church, I didn't know a thing about Arlington Baptist College at that time. They wanted me, they said I had been recommended, I had finished my master's work, and would I come for an interview? So we set up for me to go for an interview. Okay, so that was in 79, and I was hired. And we didn't know if we knew we were doing what God would have me to do, but we didn't know how we were going to do it. Because I was teaching and making a pretty good salary for back then. And then when I went to the college, first of all, I was going to be driving 30 miles from my driveway to my parking place at the college. And that expense, and then I wasn't going to be making there what I was making in the public schools, because this was a private college. And we didn't know how we were going to do it, but we knew that's what I was supposed to do. So I'll make a long story short, everything worked out wonderful. I taught there 33 years. And
But then you went on to get your doctorate.
oh yeah, because the college at that time did not have an education program,
Yeah.
you know, for training teachers.
Yeah.
And of course, that's my passion. And so one day the president, Dr. Wayne Martin, came to me and he said, Helen, I've been looking at your credentials and we really need to start an education program here. So he said, would you be interested? And I said, well, Dr. Martin, I wouldn't know where to start. And he said, I believe you would. I remember that night going home, pulling all of my books and notebooks and things that I'd had in my college classes. I spread them out all over the bedroom floor and I started studying those to see how I would go about setting up an education department out at the college.
Yeah.
And so God was so good and just helped me. But anyway, long story short, I did set up the department there. But in order for the teachers that graduated in that program to teach in public schools, our program had to be accredited by the state of Texas.
Yeah.
So that's another challenge. So I went to work on, you know, how am I going to get this program certified by the state of Texas? I hardly knew where to go. But I went to different educators at other colleges, Dallas Baptist, and talked to them. And, you know, like I said, I wasn't afraid to ask questions and find out what to do. So long story short, in 2002.
Mom, the long story short's been going on for 20 minutes.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, I'm trying to get it all in without...
I know.
Well, anyway, in 2002, I went to Austin and presented our program and took all the paperwork, and we were given certification so that our teachers could teach in the public schools, and so...
Yeah.
But
in the meantime, you went back to Texas Women's University into their doctoral program and finished that.
Right, because I couldn't get our program certified through the state of Texas without having a PhD.
Yeah.
So I started that and did that along with working full-time, a family, church involvement, youth department, all that. But yes, and then I finished my PhD in 1995.
What do you think about social media?
It has its good points, but it also opens doors for things that are not conducive to the values that we had and grew up with.
The exposure it gives to kids is not a good thing.
Right, a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of good about it, and so that's when that's a major job that we have in teaching and raising our children and everything. They have to be able to make decisions that they have to keep in mind what their parents are teaching them and how they're being raised and the value system. And well, I wouldn't want us to be without it again.
Yeah.
I just think it has to be
controlled.
But it has ruined a lot of. It has introduced a lot of bad things that are contrary to our value system.
What's the one thing that that Grandpa or Grandma taught you growing up that you continue to utilize today?
If my mother said to me one time, she said to me hundreds of times, hard work never hurt anybody.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's what my mother would say to me when I was even as I was teaching at the college and working, because that was a commute. So I talked to my mother usually every morning, like you do me.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes I would have been up.
Did you hear that, Trey? I talk to my mother every morning. You can learn from that.
He still does. Anyway, I'd kind of be feeling down or something, you know, tired or something, and I'd kind of gripe to my mother about, oh, I'm so tired or something like that, and I'm working so hard, blah, blah, blah. And she'd tell me, Helen, hard work never hurt anybody.
I think the wrong person to talk about hard work to is a woman that works 14 hours a day on a farm.
Yeah, right. And my mother had everything hard. She did the laundry by hand on a rub board.
Yeah.
And back then, all of our clothes had to be ironed. There were no permanent press clothes then.
Yeah.
Cotton and had to be starched and ironed. My mother had to do all of that. I don't know how. And so that's why she told me, don't talk to me about hard work.
Yeah.
Hard work. And my mother lived to be 100, as you know, so
Yeah.
it didn't hurt her.
It didn't hurt her at all, and eating fried food didn't hurt her either.
No, or fat meat.
I tell people from time to time that when Grandpa would eat a piece of meat, he would eat the fat first, and then if he was still hungry, he would eat the meat. Yeah. You know, I remember, I would remember the farmhouse that you grew up in, and that we would, as children, we would visit. But do you remember that in the kitchen, Grandma had that fly strip that hung from the ceiling in the kitchen? Yeah.
To keep the flies, because flies would always come in, you know, and
Didn't have any air conditioning, so the windows were up.
yeah, and the screen door would be open a lot, and yes, she had that fly strip.
Do you remember the first time that you got an indoor bathroom?
That was after I left home. That was not until probably after I married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were so excited about that.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Not having to go to the outhouse in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a great improvement.
Yeah. If you had to do your life all over again, would you change much of it?
You know, Terry, I really wouldn't, because I learned so much as a kid and growing up the life I had. Hard work, never hurt anybody, but I learned to work, and that was part of life. You know, nothing comes easy. That's what they used to tell us. Of course, I enjoy the conveniences that we have now.
Yeah.
I'm glad we have those now, because people are too soft now. They couldn't handle those kind of
a lot of times when people say something about the good old days, a lot of times they don't remember how hard those good old days were.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for the life I had, really, because it molded me and made me, I could face challenges. I mean, it wasn't easy going to college with a family and you know, all the responsibilities. And I wasn't the only one. A lot of people have done that, because that's just the way we had to do it.
Yeah.
But
there's different levels of hard times, and of course, life was hard back then. But life's not always easy today with all the conveniences.
I think life is more stressful today than maybe my parents were under a lot of stress. I know that as a farmer, my dad would have years that the crops were not good. I remember specifically one year that he had borrowed money from the bank to put in the crop. And of course, when he harvested the crop, I remember him coming back from Dallas after taking the produce to Dallas to sell. And I remember he and Mama sitting down at the table, counting the money. And I don't think he made enough to actually pay back what he owed the bank, you know. So those were stressful times. I mean, I didn't feel the stress because I knew I was going to be taken care of, but those were stressful times that people had to deal with in those days.
Yeah, yeah. When you worked at King's Candy Company, did you eat those pecan clusters all the time?
No, but I ate my share of them.
Yeah. What are you most thankful for today?
Well, I'm most thankful for the Christian home that I grew up in.
Yeah.
I'm most thankful for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just thankful for the raising that I had. You know, the philosophy that my mom and dad had, which is found in the book of Proverbs in the Bible, that spare the rod and spoil the child.
Well, that has a different meaning today, doesn't it?
Well, you're not even allowed to use the rod nowadays.
Yeah,
You'd get put in jail if you did, but that was the way we were raised. I mean, my parents believed in spankings, whippings, or correcting us. And
Terry's parents should have believed in that.
Oh, they did.
And in the schools, back in my day and time, corporal punishment that's the way they were disciplined.
Yeah.
And
you know what I remember about that? This is what I remember about, you know, when I was in high school, you could still get whippings, get paddlings.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Dad always said, if you get it at school, you're going to get it twice as bad at home.
Yeah.
There was a lot more support back then for authority. You know, parents.
That's right.
Parents, they supported the authorities of the schools. So I always had a great fear of getting in trouble at school because I knew I was going to get in trouble at home, no matter what the circumstances were.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big change that has taken place in our world today, you know, or at least in the United States. I don't know about all the other countries.
Real short, is education as important today as it was back then?
That's hard to say because we do live in an educated world and live in a world that depends on people having an education.
Yeah.
I think it's still very important.
Yeah.
But the support of the authority is lacking.
Yes.
Therefore, you have students that don't discipline themselves to studying and trying to make good grades as much as I think we did back then. So.
Mom, we could just go on all day, and sometimes we do, because we love our discussions and our talking and all of that. But to bring this to a close, before we close this second show, I want you to admit who is your favorite child in our family. It's most likely it's me, but I need my sister to hear that so that whenever we get down to the end of time, she knows that I was the number one. We're not closing until you say I'm number one.
Well, I'm not saying that. I guess we'll be here all day.
Take us, Terry.